Naval Gund Live. And as the name suggests, this is a special program for Mr. Naval Gund, who's the top influencer in the world today, among the top 100. And we are very honored to have Naval Gund with us. Welcome to this series, Naval.
Good morning, CK, and good morning, everybody, and thank you. Let's get into a new series and start airing people's grievances around the world, because the last 9 months, 10 months have been COVID lockdown. Once again, in the UK, we're in another month-long lockdown where I would say, our human rights, actually, our right to live the way we want to live, are not surprisingly been taken away. And we should accept that, because actually we're fighting a disease that we can't see, we can't touch, we can't feel. But the point is, it's actually spread by touching and feeling. So we rely on our government, actually, from time to time, to make sure that we can live healthily. So maybe that's a good way in today, because we are on lockdown and we are being suppressed with our normal daily work. But as you've got in India, you've got some big issues that are being talked about in the High Court, haven't you?
Yes, actually, the issue is gone beyond the High Court, and it is also one of the liberty rights of people, where the liberty has been taken away of some of them. And when we take liberty of few, it affects the entire population of 1.3 billion. Because if you take liberty of few, that means tomorrow anybody's liberty can be taken away. So I think the issues are much graver, much bigger, and there is a political dispensation which is coming into the fray, and there is a long story, but we don't want to talk about the political aspect. We want to
No.
talk about the attitude and why the free speech is so important. And finally, this whole incident has reached the Supreme Court of India, which is the second pillar of our democracy. The first being Parliament, second being the Supreme Court, which is not under any governance. They have an independent jurisdiction in entire India. They are deciding the rights of the few whose liberty has been very severely curtailed. And this is happening because, Neval, let me update you a little bit more, that there were people who were speaking against the government, and the government did not have the right attitude to answer them. So what they did, they went behind using their machinery around these individuals and curtailed their liberty. So I think with your experience and with your stature, you can tell us what is the importance of free speech, and how it is linked to the attitude and what makes you a leader.
It's a really interesting discussion, because in certain social media arenas in the last couple of weeks, there's been this thought process, or the concept of whistleblowing. Now, why do people whistleblow? I mean, what is whistleblowing? It's when something is happening in an organization, a country, a village, whatever it is, and it's not right. The consensus of everybody, people's rights are being suppressed by a few people that are powerful and know how to work the system. And that's why we have whistleblowers. You have, like, WikiLeaks, the person that whistle blew on, Julian Assange, that said this isn't right. This is information that everybody should know about. Well, we've all got our own opinion on that, frankly. And one thing that countries hide behind is state security. It's in the interest of national security. And I suppose I've grown up with that, and you've grown up with it, and we accept that. But sometimes you need to challenge that, and you hope that the people in those leadership positions actually challenge themselves. They don't hide behind things. As you said, it's an attitude. You know, if something is in the interest of national security, then of course you keep it that way. But if it's in the interest of national opinion, then you've got that dilemma. And we've seen over history, particularly the discussion about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Were they there? Weren't they there? Did people manipulate the evidence to build their case to go and invade? And we've seen, programs made certainly in the Western world about both sides. The whistleblowers, and we have this term whistleblowers. But let's look at the positive side here. In an organization that is really progressive, that listens to their employees and really wants to get the best out of everybody, in other words, you've got great leaders that get the best out of themselves and the organization. Promotion is on personal basis. It's people that have achieved or overachieved or done something, beyond expectations. So it's a meritocracy. There aren't many companies in the world, by the way, that work that way. There are good pockets in some companies that work that way, but there aren't many that work that way throughout. In those companies, though, it's not called whistleblowing. It's called feedback. Because the organization wants to grow. It wants to get better. It wants to hear about all of the skeletons in the cupboard. Let's air them once and for all and move forward. You can't forget them, but you can forgive them. So this is another word that we need to be cognizant of. And in a religious context, we're all taught by whatever religion you believe in, we're all taught to forgive. Forgive and move on. But how many people do? And this is the whole concept, really, of people that can't not say something because they believe, and this is about beliefs now, they believe everybody should know. And it's that fine line between should everybody know, or have you been put in a privileged position whereby all you're going to do is create mass panic by letting people know, whistleblowing on what you know. And the last thing any government, any organization wants is panic. Not just panic in the organization, but, there's a run on the shares. We've had in the past where companies' information have been leaked to the press, prior to a big announcement, and the share price spikes and people make huge profits, or the share price dips and people still make huge profits. So we need to take this into context. What is a whistleblower? Why are they there? Is it just about attitude, but not just attitude of the whistleblower, attitude of the surroundings around them? The people, you said your Supreme Court is independent. That's absolutely fantastic. And most Supreme Courts around the world are independent. They come to their own decision, not based on any governmental pressure. It's independent thought. And that's why a Supreme Court judge is the pinnacle, in my view, of service in a country. So it's a big subject, big subject, CK. What have you got to say about it, what I've said?
Well, I fully agree with you, Naval. In fact, why I picked up this subject, because the free speech is so important for this development of society, development of individual, and also development of the companies. I mean, we are not talking about the political aspect, but we are only restricting our discussion to the business aspect. So, although we have picked up few leaves from the political arena which is going on in India at the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court judges, as you mentioned, they are not elected They are not selected by individuals. There is a collegium which selects the judges, and there are parameters defined. That means you have to have in that role for some time to become elevated to Supreme Court. So that means your track record has highly valuable to become acquire that position. So I think we leave it to that, because that is why we call them independent, because they are not governed by any government, by
Yeah.
any minister, by parliament. They are above all. So that is why they are the custodian of the constitution. And let me go back to the free speech. You know, India being the largest democracy, which was established the modern India in 1947, but the oldest democracy of the world, as we know in the modern times, is the United States. But they realized the importance of the free speech way back, 300 years back, when there was no democracy anywhere in the world. They were all monarchies. And they implemented the First Amendment in 1791. So I think we should, give credit to the founding fathers of United States of America, where they realized that the First Amendment to the Constitution will be about free speech. And here in 20th century, 21st century, we are again talking about free speech and travesty of justice. But I think we can leave that aside. This is just the data point for our discussion. In the business arena, if we don't permit our employees to speak freely, what we expect in a company, it will be we expect the company to be ruled by one man who is the owner of the company. So there are companies in the world which are called one man show, and there are companies which are governed by, or there is a forum or a management consulting chair which is directing the chairman or the CEO. So that means in those companies the liberalization is much much greater than the normal companies where there is no free speech. So I would like to throw it back to you as a question: what is the difference between a person who allows freedom in his company, where his juniors can come up with any idea, and you should have patience, less ego, to listen to those ideas and take action on some of them?
It's a great question, and one that in my career I now know, having looked at many other companies around the world, how fortunate I was throughout my career of being able to comment and for those comments to be listened to. I didn't always get what I wanted, but that isn't the point. It's been, first issue is welcoming with open arms a discussion about what the team's doing, how the team's performing, and how you're performing in the team. Now, of course, in the modern day arena, certainly in the last 20 years, but even when I had a proper job in corporate life last century, we had HR reporting, and they called it performance reporting. And in many organizations, they still do. You get an annual appraisal, and then you get your annual increase, because you always expect an increase, don't you? I mean, that's what happens. The pay always goes up, never goes down. Until COVID came along, when all of a sudden all of these metrics are now being, confused in areas. But it was that you would have an annual appraisal, and then a month later, you got an announcement of your increase and your bonus, your one-off. So there was an automatic linking between the annual appraisal and your pay. And yet, if you talk to any HR director around the world, they'll say, no, there's no linkage. To which I say, well, why do you do it at the same time? Why don't you actually have it 6 months apart? And then you can actually tell people there is no linkage, because your annual appraisal is based upon the last 12 months. And then 6 months later, you get your new paycheck, your new bonus, whatever that's going to be. So do organizations, the question I ask myself all the time, time when I go into an organization, do you encourage people to speak out? Do you, in essence, engage, educate, and literally listen to what's going on in the organization? Because if you don't, there's this classic phrase in leadership terms: do leaders walk the talk? And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to leadership. If you've got a boss that actually says, if you ever think we can do things better, don't rush into my office and, tell me all at once, because it'll be garbled. It won't be a very strong message. Make your case, and once a week, once a month, we'll have that discussion with the team. What that means is you're empowering your team to come up with new ideas, new ways of doing it that's going to be better for the team. Not just better for themselves, because if you make it too personal, people are only going to come in and say, me, 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 me. You don't want to do that either. What you want to do is say, look, we work as a team. You all sort of know what each other does. You see how the jigsaw is made together. Let's see what we can do to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the jigsaw. Can we do it with less people? Can we do it with less money? Can we actually take administration out of the system? We're preparing a report. Who's reading it? Why are they reading it? Do they still want it? Is the frequency of when they get it useful? We were, I was in group consolidations for several years, and the most important part of our job wasn't what we did, it was what the effect of what we did had on the business. So we were quite proud to get our monthly report, which was historical, what happened, but, and this is what we believe why it happened. We would get that out by the 5th of the following month. Now, already it's 5 days out of date. But it got into the hands of the managers so that they could make alignments so that the next month reporting, which was now 25 days later, so 5 days had already gone, could improve. They could shift and make adjustments, sometimes very marginal, sometimes quite dramatic. They could make adjustments to get back on track to what the forecast was going to be. And you're only going to do that if you've got an open discussion arena. You might call it freedom of speech. In a business, if you can say what you think based upon the evidence that you see, then your boss needs to turn around to you and say, you're right, or slight grey area here, or you're wrong. But not just say you're right, grey area, you're wrong. Give you an explanation of why you're wrong, what you've missed, so that next time you grow and don't take what we call behavioural waste further in the system. So you're improving your knowledge base by having the right discussion at the right time. They call it just in time for everything. But being recognised in the organisation that you're there to add value. And this is part of you adding value. And unless you entertain those discussions and in your own little department, walk the talk and encourage others to walk the talk and recognise, we don't want to be having fires burn high every time. We want to try and make this department, this organisation run as smoothly as possible, and at the right time, which could be daily, it could be weekly, it could be monthly, whatever the right time is, we all come together and we look for improvement. And the other thing is, not only do we look for improvement, but we celebrate the successes we've had. It's a big, big subject, this, you know, and I'm interrupting you a little bit here because you want to say something. So go ahead, you know, freedom of speech. You go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think you have given a very nice explanation of why the freedom of speech in a corporate or in a company is very important. But many times it also depends on the leadership, and many times because even leadership is consisting of humans, uh, people like you and me, and they have certain egos or I will choose a better word, complex, some sort of a complex in themselves. And because of that, the leadership don't recognize the importance of free speech. So what is your message to these leaders? Because obviously we want to improve the attitude of overall leadership team through this series. What is one message or a couple of messages you want to give to not have your personal complexes come in the way and stop the freedom of speech in your company?
Great question. And the simple answer is look in the mirror to start with. You need to ask yourself a couple of questions. Do my team trust me? Am I supportive of them? Do they think that I'm a good boss? And this is where you need to be honest with yourself. And you can ask lots more questions, but start with the ones that are really simple but are really hard. Am I a good boss? What makes me think I'm a good boss? How do I know I'm a good boss? And the other thing is, we've all got a bias. There's been a lot of discussion in the last month or two about personal bias. You mentioned it, actually, with High Court judges. They're independent. There is no bias. They don't lean towards the government. They don't lean towards the people of the country. They should be biased towards protecting the Constitution, because a lot of effort went into developing that Constitution. And whilst it's challenged on a regular basis, if it's a robust Constitution, it never fails you. And that's the whole purpose of, or part of the purpose of, the Supreme Court. But coming back to your little team, your small team, because most SMEs have a small team. How you do this is you recognize everyone has a bias, but what you want is it's service above self. There is this thought of service leadership, which works quite a lot of the time, but can be abused if you go too far. But if you think about what's best for the organization, and you always do what's best for the organization, you will gain the respect of everybody, because they'll know who you are, and they'll know that they now need to be doing what's best for the organization, not what's best for them, not allow their egos to get there, so they get the pay rise and their colleagues don't get the pay rise. This is about, there's no I in team, but there's me and my mate. And if you think of me and mate, they're all in team, but there's no I, if that makes sense. So we're working for other people, not bringing apples in and saying, oh, look how good I am, here's an apple for the teacher. That isn't working for other people. Celebrating success of other people, that's working with other people. These things have been written for years and years and years, and you've only got to pick up a good leadership book and you will find the answer to the simple question, do leaders make all the decisions? The answer is no. They only make decisions that they're entitled to make.
Deval, let me share some experience that I had, my personal experience, having worked with few organizations, few corporates, few of them are global and few of them are small. I have never seen any company implementing a true 360-degree appraisal system. There was one company which had the courage to implement the beta, but then they also got chickened out and they did not implement 360 degrees. So I'm just talking about the global names. I don't want to mention these names, but they are present in every country and they are global powerhouses. None of these companies have courage to implement 360 degrees. Yet there are books written on them. In fact, in some sense, we are also making that discussion in this series today. Uh, but I don't think people have courage to do that. I think the first thing we need to battle is to, give them courage, because if you want to implement freedom of speech, the leadership team must have courage. So another C for you.
It's always about the C's: commitment, courage, competence, capability. The thing here is, when you start a company off, all companies are started with one person's idea. Then you bring another person in to help you grow that idea. Maybe manufacture, find a manufacturer to grow the idea. Put some design into it so that the idea grows. Talks about customer responsiveness, customer service. So actually goes and finds out whether that idea is a good enough idea for someone to buy. Like, for instance, you've got a product that could be $1 million. You only need to sell one of those to make a success. But if you've got a product that's worth $1, you need to sell 1 million. So your audience is completely different. It's highly unlikely that you've got something you're selling for $1 million and you've got a huge audience for, and when I say huge, like expansive audience for. So when you grow as an organization, you are adding in someone else's opinion. You're adding in another human being. And if you imagine in some of the largest organizations in the world, which are strategically placed around the world, they're in different countries, not all English speaking, for instance. It could be anything, but they're take Tata, for instance. It's got many companies around the world. I don't know how many people they employ totally, but it must be in the millions, probably, at least in the top hundreds of thousands. That means you've got 1 million different opinions. Now, there will be patterns in that 1 million different opinions that actually will say, well, we're going to lean to the left or lean to the right on certain things. But the key to that is just make all of your local area work with you. Understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because if a good leader brings the team with them, it asks the team, how do you think we're doing? You mentioned the word courage. It's almost like having as much courage on the battlefield, frankly, because you're going to get lots of people tell you, as soon as you start to open up and they trust you that you're going to do something with it. I've slipped away from the C words, right, to trust, because trust is a big thing in an organization. But if they're going to trust you, they're going to be courageous and open up. They're going to really push the boundary. Especially young people are brilliant at this because they've got no axe to grind. I remember my first job coming out of university. We were fortunate to go on a graduate training program, and it wasn't the typical program that you see today. You go into a department and you work there for 6 months, and then after 6 months they place you somewhere else in the organization. Now, that isn't a graduate training program as far as I'm concerned. We went round the country. We went to all of the manufacturing bases around the country, and we learned the difference in manufacture. We learned about people. Now, I was on their finance graduate scheme, but I worked alongside marketing graduates and HR personnel, as we used to call it in those days, graduates. And we would work together as a team. And after each visit, we would do a short presentation to the management team. Now, believe you me, we did not pull any punches. And as we got further and further into the organization, so the first one was very raw. You know, we didn't know what they were doing was right or wrong or, the best thing. We just made a few comments. By the second and third, we already had 2 or 3 to relate to. So we could then say, well, this is what happens in this part of the organization. Why don't you do that? Because what you're doing seems to be a little long-winded. Now, they did this for a very good reason, because they wanted to spread best practice. And it was only about 18 months into my first job that I was told why the graduate program was designed the way it was. Because the senior management didn't want to tell the next level down how to do their job. But if it was coming from raw graduates that they could laugh at, actually, with some things, but might take on 1 or 2 nuggets where they hear it's happening like this over there, why don't you do that here? That was it was music to the chairman's ears, frankly, because we were actually sharing best practice in a very collegiate type of way. Now, I'm not professing that this is the way to do it, frankly, because it is a little underhanded. It's not quite in the freedom of speech arena that we're talking about here. But if you do have an organization that shares because they care about the organization, you'll get the best out of everybody. Because people will then say, oh, I'm here on merit. I better start performing. And they kick into their own leadership pattern. Their ego goes. Just because they've been there 10 years and someone's been there 5 years and that younger person is their boss, it doesn't matter. They're quite happy where they are. Now, this doesn't happen in as much as we would like to think it happens, but it's down to the attitude of the leadership where it really can make the difference.
Neville, I think this is a very vast subject, as you mentioned correctly. But I think it starts with freedom of speech. And I think the message that you have given us and other CXOs, leadership who are watching this program is very clear. The freedom of speech in your company will automatically lead to freedom of thought. So any company which is existing today must have freedom of thought among their employees, among their partners, among their investors. Because if the freedom of thought is not there, then you will not be able to diversify. You will not be able to find solution to your clients. And that is why freedom of speech is directly linked to your business and your profitability. So with this, I will end this discussion today, Neville. Thank you very much. And we will catch up in the next episode of Neville Gunt Live.
Thanks very much, CK. Enjoy yourself, everybody, and go out there and enjoy it, because business should be fun. So I keep being told.
Take care and bye-bye, Neville.
Bye-bye.